Now I will be using Peter Singer to argue that it is morally impermissible for Halliburton's Oil Company to engage in business transactions with Cuba when such transactions are prohibited by the U.S. government. Humans should act in accordance with the basic principle of equality. Humans differ as individuals. Equality is a basic ethical principle and is not to be taken as a fact. The principle of equality is the principle of equal consideration of interests. The principle of equal consideration of interests states that we must give equal weight in our moral deliberations to the like interests of all those affected by our actions. Interest can be anything that a person desires as long as it is not incompatible with another desire or desires. A human's own interests, or self-interests, cannot have more importance than those interests of anyone else. A human must choose the action that has the best consequences for everyone affected. The best consequences are those that further the interests of those affected. We have a moral obligation to prevent as much suffering as we can without sacrificing something else of comparable moral importance. The principle stated in Premise 10 takes no account of proximity or distance, nor makes a distinction between cases where I am the only person who can take action and those cases where I am just one among millions in the same position. Morally impermissible acts violate the basic principle of equality. There is a question as to whether it is morally permissible for Halliburton's Oil Company to engage in business transactions with Cuba when such transactions are prohibited by the U.S. government. A company is a number of individuals assembled or associated together. A business transaction is an activity or event that can be measured in terms of money and which affects the financial position or operations of the business. Money is an officially used legal tender. Transactions can be classified as exchange or non-exchange. Exchange transactions involve physical exchange, such as purchasing and selling. Non-exchange transactions are events that do not involve physical exchanges, but where changes in monetary values are determinable. To prohibit means to forbid an action, activity, etc. by authority or law. A law is a system of rules that a particular country or community recognizes as regulating the actions of its members and may enforce the imposition of penalties. Penalties are punishments imposed for a violation of a law or rule. The United States government conducts the policy, actions, and affairs of the United States. The United States government's interest is to protect its people. The U.S. government prohibits trade with certain countries because trading with them could negatively affect their national security. If the U.S. national security is threatened, all the people that live in the U.S. can be affected. Halliburton's sole interest in doing business with countries prohibited by the United States is to gain profit. In 2011, Halliburton did nearly $1.2 million in business with Cuba, who is prohibited by the U.S. government to trade with. Halliburton is putting their interests over the interests of the people of the United States, which violates Premise 7. Since Halliburton's interests of prohibited business transactions with Cuba can have an effect on everyone in the United States, the company should choose an action which would produce the best consequences for the most people, which would be the people of the United States. If Halliburton can prevent suffering without sacrificing something else of comparable moral importance, then they ought to do so. If Halliburton were to continue doing business with Cuba, then they could put the entire United States at risk. Halliburton's action to continue prohibited business transactions would not produce the best consequences, violating Premise 8. Therefore, it is morally impermissible for Halliburton to engage in business transactions with Cuba when such actions are prohibited by the United States government.